So this diagram is called a line graph or a line chart. And here we have the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. These will be referenced in many of the questions that the IELTS put to you. So this is just an imaginary exercise, really. I've just put in sales or consumption. Could be anything like that. Maybe 100 sales, 100,000 sales, or how many of these products are being consumed. Here we've got different years. This is not factual, okay? It's purely fictional. But this is the kind of thing that IELTS will give you. And the red represents fish and chips, and the black represents hamburgers. And they'll ask you to explain this type of graph. And here you can see there's a dip in sales from 300,000 to 200,000, and then it starts to pick up again here. Whereas hamburgers, represented here from 1965, from hardly any sales, and then we go up to 1985 and approaching around 200,000. Not exactly 200,000, but around that. Now we're going to use some language to incorporate into our academic writing of line charts, and we'll look at different charts as we go along. Okay, so here are the expressions we're going to use when we're describing our line chart or our line graph. Don't forget, they'll ask you questions about the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. These will be in relation to the figures on the left hand side of the line graph and the figures underneath. Now here's some expressions we can use when we're explaining about the graph. Number one, position statement. That's when the statement doesn't move. For example, the price of petrol stood at £1.67 per litre, just for example. So what we're looking at here is this phrase here, stood at. It's a very good phrase to use if you're looking to score a band score of 8 and above. Then we look at the next one. For example, in 2017, the salt export accounted for about 15% of total exports. So here's another phrase, accounted for. A very good phrase to use to get a higher bound score. Accounted for, it means the amount of the actual product. Here it's 15%. Then we have the movement statements, which give you an idea of something fluctuating up and down. An increase is when it goes up, and a decrease is when it comes down. So there was a decrease in the price of petrol, or there was a decrease in petrol prices. Another good phrase to use, a decrease. There was an increase. Now look at the difference. A decrease, but an increase, because increase begins with a vowel, the letter I. Now, there was an increase in the salt export, or there was an increase in export of salt. Or that should be actually, there was an increase in the export of salt, and there was an increase in the exported salt. All are possible, but again, these are the phrases we're looking to use. Stood at, accounted for, a decrease, an increase. We come down to here. Petrol prices decreased. The price of petrol decreased. So here we simply have decreased with the ED, because that's what happened in the past. Now, the export of salt increased. The salt export increased. The exported salt increase, because that's what it did in the past. And there's the ed regular verb. Now, again, these are all phrases which I would recommend using when you're detailing your line graph or your line chart, as they say. Let's look here. Petrol prices experienced a decrease. So there's a good word for you. Experienced a decrease. Because that's what happened to the price. You could also say the price of petrol experienced a decrease. And don't forget, it doesn't have to be petrol or salt. It could be any product that they've given you on the graph to explain. And you can say if it goes up, it's experienced an increase. If it goes down, it's experienced a decrease. So going up, that's the vertical axis with the numbers on the left hand side, and the horizontal axis with the dates underneath. The export of salt witnessed an increase. Now there's a very good phrase for you. Witnessed an increase. The export of salt witnessed an increase. The salt export witnessed an increase. The exported salt witnessed an increase. So these are all phrases that you can use when explaining a graph. Okay? Now we're going to have a look at some more expressions that we can use. So this is what we say for time phrases from 1980 to 1985, but between 1980 and 1985. Now these phrases we can use with our other phrases to combine a more complex sentence for the IELTS Academic Writing exam. Throughout or during the period from 1985 to 1990, for example. It could be any year or period of years. During a period of 5 years. Over the period, or over the 6-month period, or over the 6-month period between May and November, or over the period between May and November. So we're now getting more and more complex, especially as we consider integrating these with the previous phrases. And we say in 1985, by 1990, and for 5 years. Okay? Now we're going to look into this in greater detail. So here we're looking at grammatical variations, part 4. For example, bicycle sales increased steadily from 2000 until 2005, then fell slightly in the following year. Now here we use the conjunction then, but you don't want to keep saying then all the time. Then this happened, then that happened. They want to see you using different words as conjunctions, such as before and after. Let's have a look. Bicycle sales increased steadily from 2000 until 2005, before falling slightly in the following year. After increasing steadily from 2000 until 2005, bicycle sales fell slightly in the following year. So although before and after are opposites, they also here, they have the same meaning, but at least very, very similar meanings. So this is how they want you to use different words to connect your statement. Okay, variations in vocabulary. These variations, they can increase the variety of language, the wealth of language that you use, which can also make your writing sound much more interesting. And it will help you with your band score. So here we're using there was, and here we're using saw, and here we're using experienced. So these two are acting as conjunctions, if you like. They're assisting us as well. So there was a slight fall in book sales in 2015. So I like to use different products because you never know which product they're going to give you on the line graph or the chart. So initially, obviously, I used hamburgers and fish and chips, but I want to show you how you can use it. I mean, I could have just gone through the whole thing with fish and chips and hamburgers, but I decided no, we'll do bicycles, we'll do books, because it really doesn't matter what the product is. Let's look at the next one. You don't need to say the year, but you can if you want. So the year 2015, you could begin 2015 saw a slight fall in book sales. Book sales experienced a slight fall in 2015. So each one of them has the same meaning, but you can use it in different ways to boost your band score. Okay, so part 6, data and evidence. So when giving key information in a diagram, it's very important to give evidence that supports what you're telling the reader, or when you're in the exam and you need to give the actual evidence. So your ideas must be supported by specific percentages and numbers. So that's what we've got here. Book sales increased slightly from 46 million. Now you don't have to say million, but you can if you want. You can say from 46 to 51 million. Both are possible. We're talking about copies of books between 2019 and 2020. Book sales increased slightly from 46 million copies in 2019 to 51 million the following year. Book sales increased by 5 million copies from 2019 to 2020. And then I changed the product back to petrol, or as our American friends say, gas. During the period from 2019 to 2020, there was a decrease in petrol prices from £1.20 to £1.10 per litre. There was an increase in the salt export between April and July from about 15% to over 25%. So this is where we give our actual evidence. We're giving numbers, 46 to 51 million copies. Book sales increased slightly from 46 million copies to in 2019 to 51 million the following year. So here we're saying the following year. All of which, if you use these kinds of ways of expressing the information on your graph, will assist you in getting a higher band score. Book sales increased by 5 million copies. Again, we're telling the amount, the specific number. Here we're talking about the price or the cost per litre. And here we're giving specific percentages. And this is what the examiner will be looking for when you give your data and evidence in relation to the graph, whether it's a line graph or a pie chart or whatever they give you. This is the kind of thing that the examiner will be looking for. And now a quick look at vocabulary and how we use the figures that we were talking about, specific figures and data, and when we're giving evidence. So let's look at this. In 2005, the number fell to 10%. We could also say, in 2005, the number fell by 15%, or whatever the percentage is. The number dropped, or the number fell, from 50% in 2005 to 30% in 2007. And we could also say, the number dropped, or the number fell, from 50% to 30% between 2005 and 2007. So these are possible ways that you can write about giving evidence and data from your line graph. Okay, I will be making a follow-up video from this, and so that's something else for you to look out for. But for now, it's goodbye from me. I hope you enjoyed this short video about academic writing to do with line graphs and line charts. I'll see you at the next video.